In today's Quickie, we're going to be looking at heads-up 3-bet shove ranges with short to moderate effective stacks of under 25 blinds. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change from normal equity mode as a percent of prize pool to chip equity mode, which is just going to be easier to think about and totally legit since chips don't change value in heads-up. What edge do we want? This 30 chip edge is way more than we need. That's over a small blind. You couldn't make an argument for 0, but let's go ahead and say that 10 chips is going to work. So that's going to be our edge. And against this particular opponent, we need to figure out how often he's opening and how wide your call if we do 3-bet shove. So in order to figure out the open range, we can look at our HUD. In this case, over 70 instances, this player had an open force percent of 53. Now, it's possible that at the 25-50 level, he's going to be opening more or less often than that, but it's still going to be a pretty good approximation. For the call percent, one tempting route is to look at his fold to 3-bet percent. So for instance, if he has a fold to 3-bet of 50%, that would indicate that of his 53% of hands he's opening with, he's going to call with 26.5% of them. The problem, though, is that in this case, we only had 8 instances of a possible fold to 3-bet. So we're going to use just an estimate for what we think this range is, and it's probably going to be somewhere in the low 20s. Would be sort of a rough estimate here, where he's going to call with most pairs, most Broadway hands, but fold hands like King 9, King 8 suited. So this is going to be our initial estimate. And given this, we're going to see that we can't profitably shove. So we have a loss of 4 chips in expected value if we shove here. And we can still shove pretty much any ace, any pocket pair, or suited Broadway hand, but not our King 8 suited. So how can we modify this problem such that it does become a shove? Well, the factors influencing the 3-bet shove decision, besides your hand, are going to be his opening range, his calling range, the stack depth, and the size of his open. So let's say that this is now a reg who's opening super wide. He's opening, say, 70% of hands. Now, if that's the case, we can select his call percent to be pretty much anything we want. Okay, so maybe now he's going to defend wider. He's defending 30%. It's still a shove. And if he's defending, instead of that 30, something like 18%, it's a shove. And you can play around with this yourself and see that essentially no matter what range of hands he's now calling with, we're going to show a profit. So this is an example of a 3-bet shove that's unexploitable given his opening range. In other words, because he's opening so many hands, it doesn't matter what he picks to be his calling range, we can profitably shove this King 8 suited. Now, let's take a look and modify some of the other factors. So for instance, we can lower the effective stack. Now in heads up, it's never going to matter whether the effective stack is our stack or his. It's just going to be the shortest of the 2 stacks. So we're now going to make the effective stack one that's only 12 blinds. And let's assume that we have a player who is a weak opponent, and he's not opening a ton of hands here. So he's only going to open, say, 50% of hands, and with, say, upper 20s he's calling, so over half of hands he's going to defend. Now, at a deeper effective stack, which we'll look at in a moment, this would not be a profitable 3-bet shove. Okay, so if we make the effective stack 25 blinds, this isn't going to be a shove. But in a spot like this, because we're risking so many fewer chips for the same potential reward of 150 chips, we can shove a lot wider. And so we're going to have some really profitable 3-bet shoving opportunities when we're up against a weak player who's opening a decent number of hands with short effective stacks, but not defending super wide. Okay, so because our risk is so much lower here, this makes it a great spot for us.